I have always known things before they happen. When someone is about to get sick. What time it will start raining. Even when I am going to forget my phone at home. Not because I am smart. It is because I dream it first, the night before, and it always comes true. I have lived like this for 17 years, so I just call it normal, something private I never bothered explaining to anyone. Until 3 nights ago. The dream changed into something I had never seen before. I was standing in the rain, holding a knife, and in front of me was someone lying still on the ground. I never saw their face clearly, only shapes and shadows blurred by the rain. The one thing I remember with painful clarity was a tattoo on their wrist. 3 small dots shaped like a triangle. I told myself it was just a nightmare, that my dreams only ever showed small harmless things, never anything close to this. Then this morning a new student transferred into my class. Tall, quiet, sleeves pushed halfway up his arms like he did not care about the cold. When he reached for a book on the shelf beside me, his sleeve slid back just enough. 3 dots. Triangle. The exact same spot from my dream. I froze so hard I dropped the book I had been holding. He looked at me and for a second something flickered across his face, like he already understood exactly what I had just seen. He bent down to pick up my book, and when he handed it back his voice came out barely above a whisper. "You were not supposed to remember this yet." Before I could even ask what he meant, the bell rang and he walked off like nothing had happened at all, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and 100 questions I had no idea how to answer. His name was Elian. I only knew that because the teacher introduced him in front of the whole class, and half the girls in the room immediately started whispering about him like he was something out of a drama. I could not focus on a single word of the lesson. All I kept thinking about was the tattoo, and the way he looked at me like he already knew things I had never told anyone. At lunch I finally caught up with him in the hallway. I asked him straight up what he meant by what he said earlier. He acted like he had no idea what I was talking about, like the whole thing never happened. I told him I was not imagining it, that I saw the tattoo and I heard what he said. He finally stopped walking and turned to face me. His expression was tired, older than his age somehow, like he was carrying something heavy that he never got to put down. He told me to forget about the dream, that some things were better left alone. I asked him how he even knew I had a dream about him when I never said the word dream out loud. That was when his face changed, just for a second, like he realized he had said too much. He mumbled something about needing to get to class and walked away fast, leaving me standing there again with more questions than before. That night I could not sleep. I kept replaying his face in my head, trying to figure out where I had seen him before this life, because somehow, impossibly, I was sure that I had. It was not a comfortable feeling, being certain of something so completely irrational, and yet trying to argue myself out of it felt pointless, like trying to convince myself the sky was not actually blue just because I could not explain why the color existed in the first place. The next dream came faster than I expected. I was in a place I did not recognize, an old room lit by candlelight instead of electricity, the kind of place that only exists in history books. Elian was there, except he looked different, older clothes, a scar above his eyebrow that he does not have now. He was saying something to me, urgent and quiet, like we were hiding from someone. I could not hear the words clearly, but I remember the fear in his eyes, and the way he grabbed both of my hands like he was trying to keep me from running. Then the dream shifted, the way dreams do, and suddenly it was raining again, and I was holding the knife again, and he was the one on the ground. I woke up gasping. My shirt soaked in sweat, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone to check the time. It was 3 in the morning. I sat there in the dark trying to convince myself it was just my brain making things up, stitching random images together the way dreams always do. But it did not feel random. It felt like a memory, not a dream. Like I was remembering something that already happened, just not in this life. I thought about texting someone, telling my best friend everything, but how do you explain any of this without sounding like you belong in a hospital? So instead I just sat there until the sun came up, replaying his face from centuries I never lived in, wondering if he remembered any of it too. Part of me wanted to march up to him the second I saw him and demand answers right there in the hallway, but another part of me was scared that saying any of it out loud would somehow make it more real than it already felt, and I was not sure I was ready for that yet. I decided to search everything I could online. 3 dots shaped like a triangle, tattoo meaning, symbol history, anything that might explain what I kept seeing on his wrist. Most results were nonsense, generic tattoo meaning websites that clearly did not know what they were talking about. But one old forum post caught my attention, buried under years of inactive comments. Someone had posted a photo of the exact same symbol, asking if anyone recognized it from old family records. The replies were sparse, but one mentioned something about a mark passed down through generations tied to people who kept being reborn into the same tragedy over and over. I stared at my screen for a long time, telling myself it was probably some fiction writer using the forum as an outlet, not an actual answer. Still, I saved the page before I could stop myself. At school the next day I tried to bring it up with Elian, showing him the screenshot on my phone. His reaction told me everything I needed to know even before he said a single word. His jaw tightened, his eyes went somewhere far away, and for a moment I almost thought he was going to cry. He told me to delete it, that some doors were not meant to be opened twice. I asked him what happened the first time. He looked at me like the question physically hurt him, and said quietly that the first time was exactly why he was trying so hard to keep this one different. I did not understand yet what he meant by the first time, but the weight in his voice told me it was not something he wanted to explain standing in a school hallway, so I let the question sit unanswered for now, promising myself I would find the right moment to ask him properly. I did not delete it. I could not. Something about the way he reacted made me more certain than ever that this was real, whatever this was. Over the next few days he started avoiding me, taking longer routes to class, sitting at the far end of the cafeteria. I told myself I should let it go, that maybe forgetting was the safer choice for both of us. But then I would close my eyes and see his face from that candlelit room again, and I knew there was no version of me capable of walking away now. One afternoon I finally cornered him by the school gate after everyone else had already left. I told him I was not scared, even though that was only half true. I told him I needed to know what he knew, because not knowing was worse than any nightmare. For a long moment he just looked at me, like he was deciding whether I could actually handle the truth. Then he exhaled and told me to sit down, that this was going to take a while. He told me his name had not always been Elian. He told me that he remembered every single version of this life, every single time, and that I was the only one who never did. I asked him how many times. He looked away before he answered, and when he finally spoke, his voice barely came out as a whisper. Too many times to count anymore. Something about the exhaustion in his voice made the whole thing feel real in a way no dream ever had, like I was not hearing a wild theory from a stranger, but a tired confession from someone who had been carrying this weight alone for far longer than any single lifetime should reasonably allow. I did not know whether to feel scared or relieved that someone finally understood what I had been experiencing, but sitting there next to him, some small part of me finally stopped feeling so completely alone with it. He told me the story slowly, like every word cost him something. In the very first life he remembered, we grew up together in a small village, inseparable since childhood, promised to each other before either of us understood what that meant. Something happened before the wedding, he would not tell me what yet, and it ended with me holding a blade I never meant to pick up, and him bleeding out in the rain while I stood there unable to understand what my own hands had just done. He said he did not blame me then, and he still does not blame me now, because whatever forced my hand that night was never really me. After that first death, we were both pulled back, again and again, different names. Different centuries, but always the same ending. Rain. A blade. Him on the ground. He said the only thing that ever changed was how fast it happened. Sometimes we had years together first. Sometimes only days. He said this time, when he first sensed I was close, he transferred to my school specifically to try something new, hoping if he stayed close enough and warned me early enough, maybe this cycle could break instead of repeat. I asked him why he keeps doing this to himself, coming back every single time knowing how it ends. He looked at me with an expression I did not have a name for yet and said that some things are worth repeating even if they hurt, and I was apparently one of those things for him. Hearing him say it so plainly made my chest ache in a way I did not have words for yet, some mixture of guilt and gratitude and something warmer underneath both, because no one had ever chosen to stay through repeated heartbreak for my sake before, at least not that I could remember, and some part of me desperately wanted to be worth all that returning. I should have been terrified. Honestly, some part of me was. But a bigger part of me, the part that had been dreaming about him before I ever knew his name, felt something closer to relief, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place after years of not knowing why I always felt out of sync with everyone around me. I asked him what triggers it, the moment I lose control and pick up the knife. He said he still did not fully understand that part, that it seemed to happen when I was pushed into a cornered by something or someone threatening either me or him, like some deep instinct twisting into violence instead of protection. He said in a few lives there had been a third person involved. Someone who wanted to keep us apart badly enough to manipulate the situation until it turned deadly. I asked if he thought that person existed this time too. He went quiet for a long moment before admitting he had already noticed someone watching us, a girl in his last class who asked too many specific questions about our schedules, questions that felt less like curiosity and more like tracking. My stomach dropped. Somehow the idea of an outside force pulling strings scared me more than the idea of losing control myself, because at least my own mind was something I could try to manage. Whoever this was, they were not confined to my head at all. That single realization changed everything about how I understood the danger we were facing. Because a threat living only inside my own mind was something I could at least try to control through sheer willpower, but a person walking the same hallways as me, watching us both with intent, meant the danger was no longer something either of us could simply outthink our way around. Her name was Renata, and once Elian pointed her out, I could not stop noticing her. She was in 2 of my classes, always positioned somewhere she could watch without being obvious about it, always smiling just a little too carefully whenever our eyes met. I tried telling myself I was being paranoid, letting Elian's story turn every stranger into a suspect. But then I noticed the same 3-dot tattoo peeking out from under her sleeve one afternoon in gym class, and my paranoia stopped feeling irrational. I told Elian immediately. His face went pale in a way I had not seen from him before, not even when he first told me the truth about the cycle. He said Renata had never appeared this early before. Always showing up right before the ending, never at the very beginning like this. That meant something had changed, something none of the previous cycles had prepared him for. I asked if that was good or bad. He admitted honestly that he did not know, and not knowing terrified him more than any version of the ending he had already lived through. For the first time since all of this started, I saw real fear on his face instead of just tired resignation, and somehow that scared me even more than my own nightmares had. If the person who had lived through every single version of this story, who had already braced himself for every possible ending, could still be caught off guard by something new, then whatever was coming for us this time was something neither of us had any real experience surviving, and that thought alone kept me awake long after I got home that night. We started spending every free period together after that, partly out of fear, partly because neither of us wanted to admit how much we actually wanted the excuse. Between researching Renata and trying to piece together the pattern of our past lives, something softer kept growing underneath all the tension. He would walk me home even though it was out of his way. I would save him a seat at lunch without even thinking about it anymore. One evening, sitting on the steps outside my house while the sky turned orange, he admitted quietly that this was the first time in longer than he could remember that he let himself enjoy the in-between part instead of just bracing for the ending. I asked him what changed. He said maybe it was me, this version of me, asking questions instead of running away scared like some of the others had. I felt my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with fear for once. Before I could stop myself, I asked him if he thought we could actually break the cycle this time. He looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to promise yes so badly it hurt, but instead he just said that he was going to try harder this time than he ever had before, because this time felt different in ways he could not fully explain yet, and something about the certainty in his voice made me believe him even though neither of us had any actual proof to hold on to yet. I did not push him for more than that. Because honestly I was not sure I could handle a promise he might not be able to keep, so instead we just sat there quietly until the last bit of orange light disappeared behind the rooftops, neither of us saying anything else, both of us simply grateful to still be sitting there together at all. Renata approached me directly 2 days later, cornering me by the lockers when Elian was not around. Her voice was sweet, almost friendly, but every word felt calculated, like she was testing how much I already knew. She asked if I had been having strange dreams lately, phrased casually enough that anyone listening would think it was small talk. I lied and said no. She smiled like she did not believe me for a second. Then she said something that made my blood run cold, that some people are simply born to end the ones they love, no matter how many times they try to fight it, and that fighting fate usually just makes the ending crueler. I told her I did not know what she was talking about and walked away before my voice could shake. When I told Elian later, his hands actually trembled while he listened. He said Renata had never spoken to me directly in any life he remembered, that she usually worked from the shadows, manipulating circumstances rather than confronting either of us outright. Her sudden boldness meant something had shifted, and neither of us could tell if that shift made our odds better or worse. For the first time, Elian admitted he was scared not just of the ending, but of not understanding the rules of this particular version at all. I told him fear was better than pretending nothing was wrong, at least fear meant we were finally paying attention to something we should have noticed a long time ago. And for once he actually agreed with me instead of trying to protect me from the truth like he usually did. Thank you so much for listening this far. It means a lot that you are spending your time here with Withered Petals story. That night the dream came again, except this time it was different from every other version I had seen before. I was standing in the rain, the knife in my hand exactly like always, but this time I could see Renata standing just behind Elian, whispering something into his ear right before I raised my arm. I woke up shaking, certain for the first time that I was not the one truly responsible for what happened in these repeating endings. Someone was pushing me, manipulating the moment until my hand moved on its own, like Renata had some kind of influence over the exact instant everything broke. I called Elian before school even started, my voice barely steady enough to get the words out. He listened quietly, and when I finished he admitted that in a couple of the earliest lives he could remember, he had wondered the same thing, that maybe I was never entirely in control of that final moment. He said if that was true, then breaking the cycle was not about controlling my own instincts, it was about stopping Renata before she ever got the chance to whisper anything into anyone's ear again. I asked him how we were supposed to do that. He was quiet for a long time before saying that we needed to figure out what Renata actually wanted, because so far neither of us understood why she wanted us apart badly enough to keep doing this life after life. Something about saying it out loud made the whole situation feel bigger than either of us. Less like a private nightmare between two people and more like a story that had already been running for centuries without our permission, one we had only just started to actually read. We found an old photograph tucked inside a box of Elian's grandmother's belongings, one he had never thought to look through until now. The photograph was faded, decades old, showing 3 young people standing together, 2 of them clearly resembling older versions of Elian and me, and the third unmistakably Renata, her expression cold even in a decades-old photograph. On the back, in handwriting that had faded almost to nothing, someone had written that the third one loved the boy long before either of us ever met, and that love turned into something darker once she realized it would never be returned. Elian went completely silent staring at that photograph, piecing together decades of repeated tragedy into a single, simple, painfully human explanation. Renata was not some outside force of fate manipulating us for no reason. She was someone who had loved him first, in some life so old neither of us could fully remember it, and every ending since then had been her quiet revenge for a love that never had a chance to exist. I felt something twist in my chest, somewhere between pity and fear, because a person capable of orchestrating centuries of heartbreak out of grief was far more dangerous than any impersonal curse could ever be. Looking at that faded photograph, I found myself feeling something unexpected toward Renata, not quite sympathy, but something close to it, because underneath all the fear she caused us, there was just a person who had loved someone once and never gotten anything back for it, and I understood that particular kind of ache more than I wanted to admit. Knowing why Renata did what she did not make her any less dangerous, but it did give us something to work with for the first time. Elian suggested we try talking to her directly instead of avoiding her, hoping that confronting the truth head-on might finally break whatever pattern kept repeating itself. I was terrified, but I agreed, mostly because hiding had clearly never worked in any of the lives before this one. We found her alone after school, sitting by the empty bleachers, staring out at nothing in particular. When we told her we knew about the photograph, her expression finally cracked, just slightly, revealing something underneath all that careful calm. She admitted, quietly, that watching us find each other over and over, life after life, while she remained the one always left outside looking in, had become the only constant she had left to hold on to. I told her I was sorry for whatever she went through in that very first life, whatever version of us caused her that pain. But I also told her that punishing us endlessly was not going to give her back what she lost, it was only going to keep all three of us trapped in the same suffering forever. For a moment I thought we had actually gotten through to her, until her expression shifted into something colder than before. Whatever brief opening we had managed to create closed itself right back up in front of us. And I realized with a sinking feeling that understanding someone's pain did not automatically give you the power to heal it, especially when that pain had been allowed to calcify across more lifetimes than either of us could properly count. Renata told us that understanding was not the same as forgiveness, and that she had spent far too many lifetimes nursing this particular wound to simply let it go because we finally said the right words to her. She said the cycle would end when she decided it ended, not before, and that this time she intended to make sure it ended permanently, for all three of us, so that she would never again have to watch us find each other while she stood alone. Elian stepped in front of me instinctively, like his body reacted before his mind caught up, and told her that whatever she wanted to do to him, she needed to leave me out of it completely. Renata just smiled, sad and sharp at the same time, and said that had never really been an option, not once in all these centuries, because the version of the ending that hurt him the most was always the one where my own hands were the ones responsible. Her words hit harder than any threat could have, because she was right, and we both knew it. Whatever she was planning, it was built specifically around forcing my hand again, using whatever twisted mechanism controlled that final moment in every life before this one. Walking away from the bleachers that day, neither of us said a single word the entire way home. I kept replaying her expression over and over in my head, the exact moment her voice shifted from grief into something sharper. And I could not shake the feeling that whatever countdown had just started was moving faster than either of us was fully prepared to handle. Over the following days, small strange things started happening that neither of us could fully explain. I would catch glimpses of the old candlelit room from my dreams even while wide awake, flickering at the edges of my vision for just a second before disappearing. Elian said he started experiencing something similar, brief flashes of memories from lives he thought he had already fully remembered, except these ones felt different, sharper, almost like something was deliberately feeding them to him faster than before. We both suspected Renata was somehow accelerating the process, pushing the cycle toward its ending earlier than it had ever come before. I started keeping a journal, writing down every dream, every flash of memory, every strange coincidence, hoping that documenting everything might reveal some pattern we had missed. Elian spent his nights digging through every scrap of his family's old records, searching for any story of someone who had successfully broken a cycle like ours before. We found nothing conclusive, only fragments and half-stories that never quite explained how any previous version of us managed to survive intact. With every passing day, the flashes grew more frequent, more vivid, and the quiet dread sitting in my chest grew heavier, because it felt less like we were preparing to fight something, and more like something was already closing in around us. Some nights I would catch Elian staring at me across the room with an expression I could not quite name. Somewhere between tenderness and dread, like he was trying to memorize my face just in case this really was going to be the version where nothing we tried actually worked. I never told him how much those quiet moments scared me more than any dream ever had, because it meant even he was starting to doubt whether all our effort would actually be enough to change anything this time around. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day nothing was supposed to happen on. I was walking home alone because Elian had stayed late for something, when the sky suddenly darkened with unexpected rain, the exact kind of rain from every single dream I had ever had. My chest tightened instantly, some old instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs would not move fast enough. Renata appeared at the end of the street, calm and almost gentle in a way that made her more frightening than if she had been openly hostile. She told me Elian was already on his way, that she had made sure of it, and that tonight, finally, after so many failed attempts across so many lifetimes, everything was finally going to end the way it always should have. I tried to run past her toward home, toward anywhere that was not this street in this rain, but my body suddenly felt heavy, sluggish, like something outside myself was taking hold of my own movements. In the distance I saw Elian running toward us, calling my name, his voice raw with something between fear and desperation, and I realized with sick certainty that we had run out of time to figure any of this out before it actually happened. Every single dream I had ever had about this exact moment came rushing back at once, the rain, the knife, the stillness afterward, and for one terrifying second I could not tell anymore whether I was standing inside a memory or finally living out the ending I had spent so many weeks trying desperately to prevent. By the time Elian reached us, I could already feel my own hands moving without my permission, like something ancient and heavy had settled itself directly into my body, using me the way it always had before. Renata watched with an expression somewhere between triumph and grief, murmuring something about how this was always supposed to be the ending, how fighting it only ever made things worse for everyone involved. Elian grabbed both of my shoulders, forcing me to look directly into his eyes instead of at whatever object my hand was reaching for. He told me, voice shaking but steady enough to cut through the fog clouding my mind, that I was not this feeling, that whatever force Renata had attached to that recurring moment was never actually me. No matter how many times it wore my face to do its damage. I felt something inside me splitting in two directions, one half sinking deeper into whatever pulled at me, the other half clawing desperately toward his voice like it was the only solid thing left in the entire world. Renata's expression finally cracked into something like fear of her own, like she had not expected either of us to fight this hard against an ending she had orchestrated across centuries. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face instead of the calm control she always carried, and somewhere underneath my own fear I felt a strange flare of hope that maybe, just maybe, this version really was going to be different from all the ones that came before it. I do not remember deciding to fight back exactly, only that somewhere in the middle of that fog, I latched onto every single memory Elian had ever given me, every walk home, every quiet conversation on my front steps, every version of us that ever managed even a few good years together before the ending came. I used all of it like an anchor, dragging myself back toward my own body instead of letting whatever force Renata had built decide what my hands were going to do next. My fingers, which had been reaching for something sharp lying near the sidewalk, finally stopped moving entirely, and I collapsed forward directly into Elian's arms instead, shaking so hard I could barely stay upright. Renata screamed something furious and heartbroken all at once, watching centuries of careful engineering fall apart in front of her in a single unexpected moment. She told us this was not supposed to be possible, that no version of me had ever fought back hard enough to actually stop before the ending completed itself. Elian held on to me tightly, telling her over and over that maybe that was exactly the point, that maybe every single failed life before this one had simply been building toward the one time it would finally work. My whole body felt hollowed out and shaking at the same time, like something ancient had finally let go of its grip on me, and for the first time in weeks I could feel my own heartbeat clearly again. steady and entirely, undeniably mine. Elian held on to me like he was scared I might disappear if he let go even for a second, and honestly, in that moment, I was scared of the exact same thing happening to him. Renata did not disappear in some dramatic burst of light or vanish into nothing the way I almost expected her to. Instead, she simply stood there in the rain, looking suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with anything physical, like centuries of carefully held anger had finally run out of fuel all at once. She told us quietly that she honestly did not know what came next, that every previous version of this story had always ended the exact same predictable way, and she had never once considered what she was supposed to do if it actually did not. Elian, still holding me steady, told her gently that maybe this was her chance too, to finally stop living inside a moment of grief from a life so old none of us could fully remember its beginning. Renata did not answer right away, just stood there in the rain looking at both of us like she genuinely did not know how to exist outside the role she had built for herself across so many lifetimes. Eventually she turned and walked away without another word, disappearing down the street until the rain swallowed her completely, leaving Elian and me standing there together, both of us finally, impossibly, still alive. Neither of us moved for a long time after she disappeared, both too stunned by the sudden silence to trust it completely, until Elian finally pulled me into a proper hug, holding on like he needed the proof of my heartbeat against his chest just as much as I needed his. Neither of us said anything for a long while, just standing there in the fading rain, letting the silence itself be proof enough that whatever had been chasing us for centuries had actually, finally, let us go. Weeks passed, and for the first time in longer than either of us could measure, nothing repeated itself. No new tattoos appeared on strangers, no dreams of rain and knives interrupted my sleep, no flickers of old candlelit rooms haunted the edges of my vision anymore. Elian told me it felt strange, almost uncomfortable, waking up every single morning without the quiet dread of wondering if this would finally be the day everything ended again. I told him I understood completely, that I had spent so long bracing for an ending neither of us had ever chosen that simply existing without it felt like learning to walk all over again. We never found out exactly what happened to Renata after that night. Whether she finally found some kind of peace or simply disappeared into whatever came after centuries of carrying grief that heavy. Some nights I still dream, but they are ordinary dreams now, nothing prophetic, nothing painful, just the regular nonsense everyone else seems to experience without a second thought. Sitting on my front steps with Elian one evening, watching an entirely unremarkable sunset, I finally let myself believe that whatever cycle had trapped the three of us for so long had actually, finally, broken for good, and that whatever came next for us was finally, completely, ours to decide. For the first time in 17 years, I fell asleep that night without wondering what my dreams might try to warn me about. And when morning came, ordinary and quiet and entirely unremarkable, I understood that this, finally, was what an ending we actually chose was supposed to feel like. Thank you so much for staying until the very last chunk of this story, and thank you for spending this time with Withered Petals story. See you again in the next one.